Hi, my name is John Freeman. I'm the acting editor of GRANTA magazine, and I'm here today to talk to Peter Carey, the two-time Booker Prize-winning novelist and author of Oscar and Lucinda, The True History of the Kelly Gang, and now Parrot and Olivier in America, part of which appears in GRANTA 108, the Chicago issue. It's a tremendous new novel, a huge story, and I want to know, Peter, where did the story start? Did you start with de Tocqueville, or did the voices start?
Yeah, it really began with reading Democracy in America. And you know, I mean, I've lived in New York for 20 years, but I'm still sort of a foreigner, I think. And I've always, you know, I hear people quote, you know, Tocqueville all the time, and from the left and the right, and I've always been curious about it. And, But the one thing I always understood is how much, you know, that he understood America and American democracy, and he was a great supporter of American democracy. And of course, when you read the book, a whole other lot of stuff is happening.
Well, de Tocqueville is much more equivocal about American democracy than we normally think.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you know, this was a traumatized child of the revolution. I mean, one of the ways that you begin to think about him is that he grew up in a house full of survivors of the revolution. You know,
watching people who got their heads chopped off.
Yeah, and he lived in that house afterwards. So he's a survivor, and it's a survivor's household. So thinking about democracy and the mob and the mass is a terrifying thing for him anyway, but he's a smart, forward-looking person and figures democracy is coming. So, but also you read Democracy in America knowing about George Bush, knowing about Sarah Palin, and you'll find that this French aristocrat has imagined this possibility already, and indeed this is one of the sort of arguments in the book.
And the character who's based upon de Tocqueville, but who is not de Tocqueville, has a partner in his journey to America named Parrot. And tell me a little bit about him.
Well, how he's ended up is he's older than Olivier, who's the French aristocrat's name, by quite a deal. He's his servant. He never thought he was going to end up a servant. He thought he was an artist. His father's a printer. He's quite radical. And he certainly didn't want to come to America, and he certainly didn't want to end up a servant. And he's sort of really continually sarcastic about Olivier and about the French and so on. But their relationship becomes very dependent, and then finally very close. And the two of them really are an argument, really, about the nature of American democracy.
Yeah, Parrot sees it much more for what it will become, I think.
Well, Parrot sees it for what it might become, I would suggest, or what it might be in the very, and certainly he has his American dream. But at the same time, you know, Olivier sees what it's possible for us to end up in, which is where we were a year ago, which is where you're suddenly looking at the possibility of fascism. So this argument is not resolved. I can't resolve it. You can't resolve it. This ongoing argument about American democracy is sort of the engine of the book. But really, it's very much about people and characters
And love, too.
Yes.
Both of them come to America and fall in love.
Yes. I mean, that's one of those things that you don't plan in a novel at the very, very beginning, but I guess one's mind drifts in a certain way.
Like Oscar and Lucinda, this has short chapters, and it sort of moves along very swiftly. Did you feel like you were kind of returning to a storytelling mode that you had used before and moved away from in recent books?
No. I mean, I think each idea brings with it its own problems. You know, so once you have the notion of Olivier and that he's going to have this English Picaro printer as his, I want to say opponent and friend, then you've got to figure out how to do that. You know, what do you have to have first? What do you have to have second? And so I would say that formally, it's to me, it feels formally unlike Oscar and Lucinda. And particularly, there's a part in Parrot's life story which is to do with Australia, which creates a certain sort of tension in the narrative structure, and which has to be solved in particular ways that then pushes it formally into another place.
It must be hard to decide what to take from history and what to make up, because if it's entirely faithful to history, I imagine you're not really telling a story anymore. It becomes a work of research?
Well, the first thing is that I think the most important thing is that the story rules and the characters. So what's got to happen has got to happen, and the things that you know from your research should never be permitted to act as obstacles to that. So that's those sort of decisions are really, really easy to make. So you don't want your work cluttered with your research. You throw away most of it. And the other thing, of course, is that you want to be free. Once you've done enough research, you do feel free to invent what you need.
Like all of your books, especially Jack Maggs, this is a book about a group of characters between two countries. Why do you keep returning to this?
Well, I think in the past, I don't know, I think I'm doing it this time because of reading Democracy in America and living in the United States. I think why I've done it historically is really that I'm Australian, and to inhabit, to be Australian and be an Australian at my age is to inhabit a colonial sort of situation where you are always, the real place is somewhere else, where your ancestors came from somewhere else, that you don't believe where you are, that there's always this pull between, in Australia, historically Britain and Australia, and Jack Maggs particularly is about that. Oscar and Lucinda has a lot of that in it as well. Tristan Smith is about two countries. So I have a habit of, I guess, of looking at things in that way, and certainly the thread that runs through Parrott and Olivier in America is that you really are coming into it's a post-colonial situation technically, but you're still coming into that, that raw time of a place having conducted this amazing experiment, now setting out to define itself, and needing a Tocqueville to come and say, "This is amazing what you."
Needing the validation.
Yeah.
Obviously, a book is not a thought experiment, but to some degree, after telling the story and finishing the novel, did you come to any different conclusions about American democracy than you had expected? Or do the characters come to any... It's held in tension at the end.
No, I think I never really find out anything writing a novel. I mean, I find out that I can write the novel, which is really... and there was a moment... it comes at the very end of the book where the argument about democracy and how it works with those two characters comes to a climax, and then something happens about the nature of the book that you're not going to expect. And I always was driving towards the point of getting there, and in theory I could get there, but I didn't know that I could get there. And the day that I actually arrived at the point, it wasn't the final draft, but I arrived there and knew I could do it. It was exhilarating. So what I'm saying is it's not so much the discovery of things about America, but the discovery that you can pull off this crazy idea that you have.
11 novels later, you're still...
Wow, risk is what keeps us alive, right?
Yeah.